Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. The Cuban regime cracking down following Sunday's mass protests. Many now arrested or missing, and one man is dead. What happened? We hear from a former Border Patrol agent. He explains how Biden's open border policies are benefiting cartels, leading to a surge in human trafficking, and he gives us a specific example of the horrors of the sex trade. Senate Democrats say they've reached an agreement on a $3.5 trillion package to pay for their domestic spending priorities, but the announcement doesn't say how they'll pay for it. Websites linked to ransomware hackers Revil suddenly go offline. Revil was responsible for the recent Kaseya cyber attack that affected up to 1,500 businesses. The crackdown continues in Cuba following Sunday's mass protests. Cuban state-run media said one person died during clashes with police Monday. NTD's Jessica Beatty has the latest.
One man died and several were injured during a protest in Havana Monday. That's according to state-run Cuban news agency. It's the first confirmed death. One local describes what he saw.
Police tired of throwing rocks and they started shooting with their guns. They took out their guns and started shooting. There are some injured and one dead as well.
He says the protesters had been walking peacefully through a suburb.
People cried out, "Down with President Diaz-Canel, down with communism, freedom for the people of Cuba. We want medicine, we want food."
One activist group says more than 100 people have been arrested or are missing. Senator Rick Scott showed a picture of someone being arrested.
The Castro regime is cracking down. You can, I don't know how well you can see the picture here, but they're sending in their thugs, their police force and others, and just taking people away. And we don't know where they are.
And Cuba's communist regime is trying to block internet and mobile service. A local in Havana says the regime doesn't want people to see the truth.
The internet is the only way. Our weapon is the internet. If the internet is removed, then we are without weapons. What can I say? Nobody in Cuba has internet.
Introduced just over 2 years ago, mobile internet has been a key factor behind the protests. It allows Cubans to get the word out quickly when people are on the street. And exiles in Miami are also making their voices heard. Many marched on a busy highway Tuesday, blocking traffic. Witness Jules Martinez said police were guiding traffic and allowing the protests to continue. So far, the U.S. has not seen a spike of migrants from Cuba. That's according to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
The time is never right to attempt migration by sea. To those who risk their lives doing so, this risk is not worth taking. Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States.
He says anyone intercepted will be returned to their home country. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Federal authorities charged an Iranian intelligence officer and 3 alleged members of an Iranian intelligence network with plotting to kidnap an American journalist from New York. The New York journalist is not identified in the indictment, but Masih Ali-Nejad says she was the target. The indictment describes the target as a Brooklyn resident, journalist, and human rights activist who drew attention to Iran's human rights abuses. The intelligence officer allegedly hired private investigators to watch the Brooklyn journalist and her household members. It included a live high-definition video feed of the journalist's home. The journalist is a U.S. citizen of Iranian origin, and so the 4 defendants aim to eventually get her to Iran, where her fate would be unknown. If convicted, the defendants could all face life in prison. According to the federal indictment, the kidnapping ploy was part of a broader effort to lure 3 people to Iran. A retired ICE agent says Biden's open border policy has benefited cartels, causing crime and human smuggling to surge. And a Border Patrol agent says the problem of fake families coming across the southern U.S. border is actually much worse than what the official numbers show. Former ICE agent Victor Avila spoke to the Epoch Times at CPAC. He said he's rescued countless women and children from being trafficked into the U.S. for sexual exploitation purposes by cartels. But now he says the extent of that exploitation is expanding because of Biden's open border policy. And he says cartels used to traffic drugs, but now that they've noticed humans are more profitable, they've changed course.
We are having a crisis at the border, and the people that are benefiting are the organized crime and these cartels, which has spilled into the United States. We have seen their activities not just on the border towns and border states, but throughout the United States and their influence that they have, because they have presence everywhere in our country and 40 countries abroad.
He recounts a horrific example of human trafficking from Mexico to New York, in which the cartels killed a woman's baby.
The cartels treat human beings like this table. It's a commodity. They don't care. They'll treat the woman until she either dies or can't function anymore. They have her seeing 30, 40 to 60 johns a day to get paid. And in this case, she ended up being pregnant. They made her deliver the child there in the room, and they put the baby in a cement bucket in the room next to her and the other victims of human trafficking to remind them, this is what we do to you, and this is what we do to your children if you don't do what we say.
And a Border Patrol agent told the Epoch Times on condition of anonymity that agents are not to investigate fake families crossing the border. The fake family phenomenon is when migrants will bring children who are not their own to the U.S. so they can be granted asylum. The agent says the fake family problem is worse than what the official data show. In 2019, 5,800 fake families were identified in an 8-week period, but during the first 8 months of this fiscal year, there have only officially been 70 claims of fake families. However, the agent says they get 70 claims easily in a few days. Democrats in the Senate say they've reached an agreement to spend $3.5 trillion on domestic programs. But the plan still faces obstacles before it gets to President Biden's desk. NTD's Colin Fredrickson has the story.
After an hours-long meeting, Democrats on the Senate Budget Committee have agreed to increase funding on domestic programs.
The Budget Committee has come to an agreement. The budget resolution with instructions will be $3.5 trillion.
Schumer says that's in addition to the bipartisan bill on physical infrastructure. This money is for other Democrat spending priorities, including health care, education, and climate change. Democrats plan to pass the bill without any Republican support. But with an evenly divided Senate and a slim majority in the House, any dissent could be fatal to their plan. The most likely candidate to torpedo the bill is moderate Democrat Joe Manchin. He told reporters Tuesday, "I think everything should be paid for. We've put enough free money out." The Democrats' plan doesn't say where the money is coming from. Senator Bernie Sanders says wealthy people and corporations aren't paying enough taxes.
And what this legislation says, among many, many other things, that those days are gone. The wealthy and large corporations are going to start paying their fair share of taxes so that we can protect the working families of this country.
Manchin indicated he may support a smaller bill. Policy analyst David Ditch tells NTD that Democrats call their spending plans infrastructure to hide their radical left-wing agenda. And he says they spend far too much on things that would provide minimal benefit to the public. Ditch says it is an attempt to centralize as much power and control as possible in Washington, D.C. Democrats say they hope to pass the bill before the August recess. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
High-ranking officials from the Biden administration spoke at the Global Emerging Technology Summit in Washington Tuesday. They talked about how contests over advanced technologies will shape the future of the world.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the world is divided by the way it uses advanced technology. He says oppressive regimes are using it to impose the horrors of techno-authoritarianism, but democratic countries want to use technology to improve people's lives.
We need the United States and we need its partners to remain the world's innovative leaders and standard setters, to ensure that universal rights and democratic values remain at the center of all the innovation that's to come.
Blinken says the U.S. has to defend the internet from taking over by autocratic governments and cyber criminals.
In many ways, we are at an inflection point. Some would say even a tipping point. And our choice is between giving up on our vision for the internet or stepping up the fight. We will step up the fight.
He says America will stop cyber criminals if other countries don't.
Our message is clear. Countries that harbor cyber criminals have a responsibility to take action. If they don't, we will.
Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin says artificial intelligence and technology are crucial to future military plans.
Innovation cannot be an afterthought. It is the ball game.
He says China is the main challenge to the U.S. military, and they plan to be dominant in artificial intelligence.
And Beijing already talks about using AI for a range of missions, from surveillance to cyber attacks to autonomous weapons.
Austin says the U.S. will compete to win, but the U.S. must hold on to its ethics and values while winning the challenge to develop the most advanced military technology.
Websites run by the ransomware gang Revil suddenly became unreachable on Tuesday, sparking widespread speculation that the group had been knocked offline.
Websites by Russia-linked ransomware group Revil became unreachable on Tuesday, sparking widespread speculation that the group had been knocked offline. Revil has collected tens of millions of dollars in ransom payments in return for restoring computer systems it's hacked. In recent weeks, it claimed responsibility for a ransomware attack on U.S. IT firm Kaseya, affecting up to 1,500 businesses worldwide. It was unclear whether Revil's disappearance was a momentary fluke or whether the hackers had been removed from the internet by someone else. Vanishing acts are common in the ransomware world, where gangs tend to disappear and rebrand when they begin attracting too much heat. Revil has already been drawing top-level U.S. government attention, and pressure has been mounting on Washington to take more decisive action against Revil and similar groups. The U.S. has been hit by a string of high-profile hacks by ransom-seeking cybercriminals, including an intrusion into Colonial Pipeline, which disrupted gasoline deliveries across the East Coast. President Joe Biden hinted on Friday the U.S. could soon take more aggressive action on ransomware, saying it made sense to retaliate against the Russian servers used in those attacks. The White House declined to comment, while an attempt to reach Revil was unsuccessful.
A new position may soon be filled in Washington. The White House has confirmed that President Biden will nominate Dr. Rahul Gupta to be his administration's drug czar. According to a White House statement, Gupta would be the first physician ever to head the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. In announcing the nomination, the White House said it's another part of the fight against the national addiction and overdose epidemic. Gupta's nomination requires Senate approval. It looks like President Joe Biden might be struggling to appoint a permanent Food and Drug Administration leader. Some Democratic senators don't support Acting Commissioner Janet Woodcock. They partly blame her past FDA work for the severity of the opioid crisis. It's unclear who else might be in the running to lead the agency that's helping address the pandemic. Officials say it's taking time to find a qualified nominee. President Biden's nominee for Deputy Secretary of Labor was confirmed by the Senate, despite worries about her inability to stem unemployment benefit fraud. Julie Su will serve as the #2 Biden appointee managing the Department of Labor. This comes as the federal government provides hundreds of billions of tax dollars in supplemental unemployment benefits to Americans who lost jobs because of the lockdown. She was confirmed on a straight party vote, with 48 Democrats and 2 independents supporting her nomination. All 47 Republicans present voted against the nomination. 3 were absent. Su is current director of California's Labor and Workforce Development Agency. $31 billion in fraudulent unemployment claims were paid out under her leadership. Texas Democratic lawmakers who fled the state on Monday are in Washington, D.C. in an attempt to block Texas's voting bills. Governor Greg Abbott is now calling for their arrest. NTD's Jason Perry spoke with a constitutional expert named Rick Green to find out the details.
The Democratic lawmakers who fled Texas are still in Washington, D.C. Some of them believe that Texas's voting bills are in retaliation to the 2020 presidential election.
These Republicans in this legislature may have changed the Messiah, Jesus, to Trump, but I haven't. And I'm going to make sure that everything that I can do, that my constituents' right would not be stripped from them because of what they believe in is a lie. Trump lost the election. Yes, he did. And they need to tell the people of this country the truth.
Others are calling on Congress to take bold action to stop the Texas bills.
We can't stay here indefinitely to run out the clock, to stop Republican anti-voter bills. That's why we need Congress to act now and pass the For the People Act.
A former Texas lawmaker and America's constitutional coach, Rick Green, says the Texas voting bills are not meant to restrict voting rights.
We're trying to stop in Texas, which is chaos in the elections. We don't want election officials to be able to change the rules at the last minute to favor one side over the other. We don't want people to be able to go in and vote without guaranteeing who they are And we want to make sure that the absentee ballot process is not manipulated, that it's only used for those few people that absolutely cannot show up and vote at the polls.
But the Texas Democrats left the state so the election reform bills could not be voted on. U.S. Senator John Cornyn described the move as taking your ball and going home in the middle of the game.
They got on 2 chartered jets, maskless, with at least 1 case of light beer, and hopped on the jets to come to Washington, D.C.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott told KVUE that as soon as they come back to Texas, they will be arrested and cabined inside the Texas Capitol until they get their job done. Green explained how arresting the lawmakers would work.
Texans feel so strongly about this, we put it in the Constitution that we could force these legislators to get back to work. And so then in the House rules, they have a mechanism in what's known as Rule 5, Section 8, where they can literally tell the sergeant at arms, go arrest these members, drag them into the chamber, lock the door, and let's get the work of Texas done.
And on Tuesday, the Texas House did just that in a 76-4 vote and authorized arrest warrants for the Democratic lawmakers who are absent without excuse. On the same day, President Biden expressed his disapproval of the new voting bills being passed in red states.
This year alone, 17 states have enacted, not just proposed, but enacted 28 new laws to make it harder for Americans to vote.
Many Republicans believe the new laws are to improve voting integrity, while Democrats believe they are suppressing voter rights. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Arizona Senate President Karen Fann says election auditors found a different total number of ballots than the official election results. They're going to confirm the total number by recounting all of the ballots again using counting machines. Fann says the numbers are different, but she did not say by how much. The original count included over 2 million votes. The Arizona Senate Democratic Caucus posted on Twitter that it was a lie. The chairman of Maricopa County's Board of Supervisors tells the Arizona Mirror that he isn't surprised by the different results. The frequent audit critic says the counting process was flawed. Fann tells radio host Mike Broomhead she's confident in the process and the auditors, and she said the new count would begin on Tuesday. Up next, a Tennessee newspaper revealed Tuesday that the state's health department is stopping vaccine outreach to minors. That only includes not only CCP virus vaccines, but also vaccines for other diseases. Residents in an Albany neighborhood lack access to fresh food and groceries, but local advocates and organizations are addressing the so-called food desert. That and more on NTD News. Exhausted crew members near the end of their search for victims of the Miami area building collapse. The death toll has sadly reached 95, with just a handful of people still unaccounted for. Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava said at a news conference that the number of people considered missing has dwindled as authorities have worked to identify everyone connected to the building. The mayor said 14 people remain unaccounted for. This includes 10 victims whose bodies have been recovered but not yet identified. It leaves potentially 4 more victims who haven't been found yet. 20 days after the disaster, officials said crews have removed 18 million pounds of rubble from the site. The mayor said search crews have taken great care to identify and preserve any personal property recovered. Tennessee is scaling back its vaccine promotion by stopping outreach to minors. Reports say the state's health department doesn't want to come across as soliciting to people under 18. Here's more.
The Tennessee Department of Health is stopping vaccine outreach for those under 18. The move covers the COVID-19 vaccine and many others, including those for flu and HPV. Nashville-based newspaper The Tennessean reported the news Tuesday, citing an internal report and agency emails. The newspaper says the health department will no longer operate COVID-19 vaccine events on school property and will stop mailing postcards to teenagers, reminding them about taking a second dose of the COVID vaccine. The report also explains that if the department has to issue vaccine-related information, the agency logo will be removed from relevant documents. According to the internal report, these decisions were made directly by Health Commissioner Dr. Lisa Piercy. Tennessee's former top vaccine official, Dr. Michelle Fiskus, says the rollback of vaccination efforts came amid pressure from Republican lawmakers. Fiskus was fired without explanation on Monday. Health Department spokesperson Sarah Tanksley confirmed that the agency would end COVID-19 vaccination events at schools, but attributed the move to falling demand. She said the agency has been aiming to send second dose reminders to parents instead of minors.
A federal appeals court rules Americans can legally have access to handguns before they're old enough to drink alcohol. A 3-judge panel of the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals says placing a minimum age of 21 years old to buy weapons from licensed dealers violates the Second Amendment. The majority opinion, written by Judge Julius Richardson, says 18 to 20-year-olds have Second Amendment rights. Richardson's stance was backed by Judge G. Stephen Agee. Both Richardson and Agee were appointed by Republican presidents. Judge James Wynn Jr., who was appointed by a Democratic president, dissented, saying the ruling gives the gun lobby a win in a battle it lost on Capitol Hill decades ago. Residents in the south end of Albany, New York, live in what has been called a food desert, but sidewalk refrigerators, a veggie mobile, and a local chicken coop are helping alleviate the lack of fresh groceries. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
Really tough out here. Really, really tough.
Getting fresh food from a supermarket in this New York neighborhood can be difficult. The nearest grocery store is more than a half-mile away from many here, in Albany's South End. Sidewalk fridges, food trucks, and other programs fill in the gaps, especially for low-income residents. Without supermarkets, advocates have tried other creative ways to make fresh food more accessible.
We're located here in the south end of Albany, which is classified as a food desert. There is a lack of options for fresh fruit and vegetables. There's no grocery store currently in the neighborhood.
Albany's South End is a neighborhood of brick and clapboard homes south of the state capitol. Dollar stores and convenience stores sell packaged foods, but people seeking a large selection of affordable produce typically face long walks or a bus trip.
Despite public transportation serving this area heavily, that does not defray the strain of carrying groceries over an extended time if you're physically able to.
Advocates focus on bringing fresh groceries to residents. The Veggie Mobile started making stops in the capital region in 2006, later adding a second smaller Sprout truck. The nonprofit sells produce at cost and accepts government benefit program payments. The mobile markets complement community gardens and other fresh food programs. Brightly painted refrigerators on the sidewalks read "Free Food" and "Comida Gratis."
With this project specifically, the goal is to have fresh, healthy foods with low intervention. So as close to the ground from the earth as possible.
Fresh food also is available from the Radix Center, a school focused on ecological sustainability. Tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, and more grow on a green patch of land, previously a vacant lot. The center keeps chickens for eggs, too, and sells fresh food at a weekly farmers market next door. The program also offers food through a farm share program. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Still to come, the death toll from the part of the heat wave that engulfed the county surrounding Portland reaches 54. More deaths are suspected. Colorado faces a severe drought. Outdoors enthusiasts worry about recreational activities like rafting, and a business owner is concerned about the future. Find out more on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
If your vehicle's manufacturer warranty is expired or is about to run out, you'll be on the hook for unexpected repairs. Breakdowns used to mean paying thousands out of pocket. Until now. Introducing Endurance Advantage, a vehicle protection plan with extensive breakdown coverage plus routine maintenance.
As a mechanic, I see it all the time. A customer doesn't keep up with their regular maintenance and it leads to a breakdown or worse, disqualifies their warranty.
No matter how many miles your car has, if it's under 20 years old, Endurance has you covered. That means insurance, Plus, endurance equals total protection. From oil and filter changes to brake pad and wiper blade replacements, Advantage provides maintenance coverage up to $3,500 per year.
With Endurance Advantage, you'll never worry about paying for covered auto repairs or regular maintenance again.
Call 800-574-6805 for a free quote. That's 800-574-6805.
Peace comes from within. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. The human body is the temple of God, and religion is the experience of God within yourself. Are you ready to discover the truth within yourself? Book an appointment now at divinelight.com.
Oregon's Multnomah County revealed the number of confirmed deaths from the recent heat wave. The average age of those who died was 70. The county includes the city of Portland.
We're now looking at least 54 out of a suspected 71 in Multnomah County who are confirmed to have died of heat-related causes. We traditionally have not had air conditioning in buildings. I grew up in Portland, and I never had an air conditioner in my house. So I know that this is a process that we need to go through. If these heat waves are something that are going to be more permanent and more frequent, then having air conditioning and other ways of cooling people in the summer months is going to be incredibly important.
County officials say they are working with the city to establish more cooling centers. Temperatures reached as high as 116 degrees. Across Colorado, rivers and lakes are at some of their lowest levels on record, but outdoors enthusiasts can still enjoy at least one thing that's been spared from drought conditions for now.
Summertime on the Cache-la-Poudre River in northeastern Colorado. Rafters and boaters are eager to enjoy the remaining waterway while they can, and businesses hope to survive a season threatened by drought.
This industry changes really quickly. We are experiencing some high temperatures now, so who knows how long the season will last, but in the meantime, we're really excited about the water levels that we're having here on the Poudre and the season that's unraveling for us here in the summer of 2021.
We are going to be rafting on the Cache-la-Poudre River today.
Johnson says the booming demand on the river is still a far cry from last rafting season, which was cut short by the pandemic and regional wildfires.
It's certainly a blessing. Certainly gives you an opportunity for redemption from a past season that was very, very tough.
But the healthy water levels on the river may not last much longer. For years, those who rely on rivers and streams for their livelihoods have struggled with hotter, drier weather. Rising temperatures mean dwindling amounts of the mountain snowpack that normally drains from high altitudes to replenish water levels. What does flow down is more likely to get absorbed by the ground before it reaches the river. Now, the heat wave gripping the region is intensifying worries, and recreational activities once taken for granted are under threat.
So yeah, a lot of the rest of the state, especially the western slope, has not been lucky enough to see the snowpack that we have here in northern Colorado.
The Yampa River in northwest Colorado is experiencing some of the lowest stream flows on record. The causes include a below-average snowpack, increasingly dry soil, and the hot, dry weather. In Steamboat Springs, rafting and kayaking ended a few weeks ago, and fishing and tubing could soon be over too, if the water gets much shallower. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Larry Elder has announced he is running for governor in California's recall election.
Radio host Larry Elder announced on Monday night that he will run for California's recall election of Governor Gavin Newsom. Elder held a celebration in Los Angeles on Tuesday. Critics have derided Newsom for his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and other issues.
He's imposed mandates without paying attention to the science that they claim that they care about. He has ignored the very mandates he imposed on everybody else. His own children remained in in-person private education. He exempted his own business from the mandates. And our schools have deteriorated in quality.
The 69-year-old is an author and host of his daily radio program, The Larry Elder Show. In a statement on his campaign website, he wrote, "I'm running for governor because the decline of California isn't the fault of its people. Our government is what's ruining the Golden State." Elder says it does not matter that Newsom will not appear as a Democrat on the ballot for his recall election.
The problem is him, not his party affiliation. And I'm not running against Democrats. I'm running against Gavin Newsom. The guy has got to go. He's got to go. He's been arrogant. Crime has gone up. Homelessness has gone up.
Other candidates who have announced their run for governor include former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, California State Assembly member Kevin Kiley, and former gubernatorial candidate John Cox. The recall election has been officially set for September 14th. Eileen Eng, NTD News, California.
Just ahead, a group of human rights activists gathered outside the Capitol to protest against Beijing hosting the 2022 Winter Olympics. And federal agencies are sending a new warning to companies still doing business in China's Xinjiang region. They're warning about forced labor and human rights abuses in the region. Stay tuned to find out more. The U.S. government says you might want to think twice before doing business in China's Xinjiang region because you might violate U.S. law. Over 1 million ethnic Uyghurs are being tortured and jailed there simply for being Uyghur. NTD's Phil Zhou reports.
Companies that continue doing business in Xinjiang, China could be breaking U.S. law because of the human rights abuses by the Chinese Communist Party. That's according to an updated warning from the U.S. government, including Homeland Security and the Department of Labor. Zubaira Shamsuddin knows this all too well as she's been fighting for Uyghur human rights and political freedom since the 1980s.
The U.S. businesses who are still doing business in East Turkestan, Xinjiang, they should stop. Because otherwise they will be complicit of China's government's genocidal policy.
She says the Chinese Communist Party targets everyone, including Uyghur businessmen, intellectuals, even regular people simply because they are Uyghurs, an ethnic and religious community.
The millions of people are still detained in the concentration camps, and in the condition of the concentration camps are just horrific.
The Labor Department says the Chinese regime's crimes against humanity include torture, rape, forced sterilization, restricting freedom of religion and freedom of movement.
They definitely killing those people mentally, physically, and emotionally. So that all this had to stop.
Just last week, President Biden blacklisted 14 Chinese companies for alleged human rights abuses and surveillance in Xinjiang, China, adding to the list of companies originally banned during the Trump administration. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
In Washington, D.C. on Tuesday, right outside the Capitol, a group of activists protested against Beijing hosting the 2022 Winter Olympics. They tell NTD that allowing Beijing to host the Games only emboldens the regime to continue with their human rights atrocities. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more from the protest in D.C.
A number of ethnic and religious groups gathered in front of the Capitol Tuesday to express why they believe Communist China does not deserve to host the 2022 Olympics.
China is the only country that has hosted 2 Olympics back-to-back. They hosted the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, and now all of a sudden in 2022, they're hosting again. No one else has ever done that. So not only should they not be hosting, they should be banned, and they should be declared a transnational criminal organization, and we should be breaking off all diplomatic and economic ties with them.
Ethnic groups like Tibetans and Mongolians have had their spiritually rich cultures devastated by the Chinese regime. Other ethnic and religious groups like Uyghurs, Christians, and Falun Gong practitioners face jail time, torture, or even live organ harvesting if they don't renounce their faith. This Uyghur woman has family members in China who've been jailed and tortured for years. She tells NTD she regularly receives blackmail phone calls from CCP members, threatening her that they will continue to abuse her mother, sister, and uncle if she doesn't stop speaking out against the party's mass genocide.
And one of the speakers is giving a warning to big corporations and name brands who are going along with the Olympics in Beijing, what they're calling the genocide games, because he says eventually they'll be ruining their brands by going along with this. He says that Olympics were founded based on brotherhood of man, which is completely contrary to the evil nature of the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, the nature of it is pure evil. I would say the nature of it is something that is totally ungodly. They have tried to make a god of themselves. And look inside yourself and see what you do really think not what the political correctness thinks, things like that, but also find people who have been through persecution, who have been through torture, read about what's really happening.
An organizer of these protests says this is about people standing with upright principles and morals.
Although people may not see anything in the short term, but the long term is that these types of activities have also gained the support of folks on both sides.
Senator Mitt Romney has just called for a U.S. diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. The European Union just passed a resolution calling for such a boycott. Now Romney and these protesters hope Congress will follow their example and do the same. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
President Biden is set to warn U.S. businesses that it may no longer be safe to operate in the city of Hong Kong. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us this report.
President Biden is planning to send a message to U.S. companies in Hong Kong that it may no longer be safe to do business there. The Financial Times reported the details, citing government sources. The Communist Party recently passed a new law giving itself the right to impose sanctions on any person or entity who complies with foreign sanctions against China. At the same time, foreign companies in Hong Kong could have their assets taken or face other penalties by the regime. The report says if Biden moves ahead with the message, it will be the first time the U.S. has issued a business advisory about Hong Kong. American firms have a heavy presence in the city. It hosts the regional headquarters of over 280 American businesses and is home to more than 1,000 members of the American Chamber of Commerce. The White House is also considering allowing Hong Kong citizens to stay in the U.S. after their visas expire. That's if they'll face political persecution if they go back. Tensions surrounding Taiwan have reached crisis levels. This says Japan's annual Defense Ministry report. They released it on Tuesday amid Beijing's intensifying military presence in the region. Japan is becoming more worried about Taiwan's security implications in regards to its own safety. Japan's Deputy Prime Minister previously said that if Taiwan falls into the hands of the CCP, Japan's southern islands could be next. The report says stabilizing the Taiwan situation is important for Japan's national security. It adds Japan needs to pay close attention with a sense of crisis more than ever before. The defense report also warns that China's increased military presence have become a matter of grave concern to the region, including Japan. A top Japanese official pointed out that Chinese vessels have been stationed very close to Japan's territorial waters for nearly 5 months now. He called it an extremely grave situation. On Tuesday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry rejected Japan's concerns. They say that China's military activities are normal and that Japan is exaggerating what they call the Chinese threat.
Up next, Paris tourism ramps up after a year of lockdown. With Americans back to vacationing in France, struggling French businesses are starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. And a new electric-powered jumpsuit is unveiled in the UK. The technology could revolutionize the way the military and first responders operate. All that and more here on NTD News.
The wait is finally over. Shen Yun returns to the stage with an all-new production filled with beauty, majesty, and a powerful message of hope. Discover the lost culture of ancient China. Discover this season, Shen Yun 2021.
Coming to the Palace Theater, July 24th and 25th. Tickets at shenyun.com/Stanford 888-90-SHOWS.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
Get ready, world, for a whole new way to invest. Introducing the Unicorn Hunters,
We are talking about a cultural and economic shift.
a savvy group of investors whose only job is to provide an unvarnished assessment of who they think can become the next unicorn.
I am in and I'm going to invest.
We all know why we're here. We're here to meet the next unicorn opportunity.
This could be a game changer for a lot of families.
Together with you, they're on the hunt for the next unicorn.
Today, France is celebrating its national holiday, Bastille Day, and thousands of military troops are marching in a parade. NTD's David Vives has the details.
France is celebrating its national day, called Bastille Day. Thousands of military and public security personnel paraded by foot on vehicles and aboard jets over Paris' Champs-Élysées Avenue on Wednesday. Some 5,000 participants took part in this year's parade, which started from the Arc de Triomphe monument and ended with a ceremony on the Concorde Square.
Of course, I really enjoy being here. Seeing the organization of the parade, seeing what the country's defense looks like, it makes me proud.
This year, the holiday celebrated love as well. A trainee soldier took the occasion to propose his now fiancée just before the French president rode down the boulevard. 2021 marks the return of the traditional military parade after last year's celebrations were replaced by a limited access event due to the pandemic. The event showcased the country's armed forces. With more than 200,000 troops, France has the largest army in Europe. Currently, 5,000 French soldiers are deployed in Africa's Sahel region to fight terrorist groups threatening the country. President Macron announced on Monday that the operation will be finished by the beginning of 2022, and they will withdraw more than 2,000 troops. David Vives, NTD News.
As French citizens celebrate, American tourists are also returning to Paris after more than a year. Even between lockdowns, few foreigners were allowed in France, a disaster for the country's tourism industry. But with American visitors coming back, French businesses breathe a sigh of relief. Here's more.
Versailles, the home of French kings until the Revolution, and until the pandemic, a favorite destination for American tourists, once again open for business. Historically for us, as the president of the Chateau, Americans have always been the most important foreign tourists. In 2019, they represented 16% of the tourists who came to Versailles, just behind the French.
In 2019, American tourists spent $4 billion here in France. But then, for more than a year, from the start of the first French lockdown in March of 2020 until June 18th, when Americans, vaccinated or not, were allowed back into the country, the splendors of France were much, much quieter than usual.
In fact, for 6 months over the winter, they were entirely closed. Inside the Louvre, you could have heard a pin drop. But even in between lockdowns, the streets of Paris, one of the most visited cities in the world, were hard to recognize without the foreigners. A disaster for France's tourism industry, which represented more than 7% of the country's GDP as of 2018. Now, with Americans allowed back in, there is at least hope.
There are about 25% of our passengers at the moment, so which is very encouraging because we didn't expect Americans to be so early back in Paris.
But many have rushed over, making the most of the opportunity to travel abroad, and with places like the Champs-Élysées still much quieter than usual.
So beautiful, like I'm enjoying everything about it. It's so different than the United States, so we're enjoying it to the fullest. It's so breathtaking.
The Eiffel Tower reopens a week from now. American tourists are back already.
Yeah, first time we've been on a plane in over a year, and the flight was great. The flight was full, which was interesting. It took about an hour to get through the airport, just to get out of the airport. But once you're in,
you're in.
With a chance to see Paris as few tourists ever get to see it, without too many other tourists around.
A new electric-powered jet suit is making waves. It could revolutionize the way the British military and first responders execute their missions. Here's NTD's Andrew Thomas with the report.
A new jet suit is taking to the skies. and it's powered by electricity. Inventor Richard Browning is the founder of UK-based Gravity Industries. Unveiling the creation, he said that switching from a jet-fueled to an electric-powered suit is part of their desire to push the boundaries of what's possible.
It is right on the margin of what's possible because of energy density in batteries. And yet we've actually managed to go and get it to work today. Honestly, 24 hours ago, it wasn't really achieving what we needed, and we've put our money where our mouth is and actually demonstrated it live to people. So it's the beginning. As battery technology gets better and better, it will get better and better, and we'll see where we get to finally.
Browning made the announcement at the Goodwood Festival of Speed in southern England, where the electric e-suit was first flown. The current batteries are only powerful enough to get a human airborne for a matter of seconds, compared to the 4-minute flight time of the jet fuel-powered model.
The electric suit has enough power to run a small street of houses. It is phenomenal how much energy you need in a small form factor to get a human off the ground. And it really just brings home how much energy you have in gasoline or diesel or those fuels.
Gravity Industries was launched in March 2017. The jet fuel-powered suit can hit speeds in excess of 80 miles per hour and is technically capable of reaching an altitude of 12,000 feet. The company recently demonstrated the jet suits to the Royal Marines to test how their product could assist in maritime boarding operations. The jet suit has also previously been tested by paramedics in England's remote rugged Lake District region. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Tourists are once again heading to Morocco amid easing pandemic restrictions and a marketing campaign that has cut travel costs.
A plane carrying French tourists lands in Marrakesh. It's a sight that's becoming more commonplace since restrictions on flights were lifted in Morocco on June 15th. Morocco was the first country in Africa to start reopening air travel, and it's now enjoying a tourism boom.
From the restart of flights on June 15th, we've been receiving approximately 4,000 passengers every day. And we're hoping these statistics will go up gradually, as there are other flight companies that will resume their flights to and from Marrakesh Airport. As you've seen, everything is going well.
Morocco welcomed 12 million tourists in 2019, including 6 million Moroccan residents living abroad. This year, tourism officials say Morocco is set to welcome 3.5 million visitors over the season from June 15th to September 30th. That's 72% of the same period in 2019.
We are very confident for the future. We are looking for several markets abroad, new markets. Of course, we have our traditional market, which is Europe, but here we are attacking other markets at the level of Latin America, Asia, India, Israel. Why not?
The tourism boom comes after King Mohammed VI ordered the transportation sector to make it easier for Moroccans residing abroad to return at reasonable prices. On top of airfare discounts, deals are being offered on train and bus tickets, plus a 30% reduction on hotel prices. It's a huge relief for the hospitality industry here, although some say they'd prefer to see more restrictions lifted, especially the night curfew that starts at 11 p.m.
It is known that when the tourism sector recovers, this is reflected positively on a group of other activities. With this, a group of categories working in this sector that were suffering, now they see the beginning of hope.
Despite the optimism, tourism in Morocco isn't expected to return to pre-pandemic levels until after 2030. According to officials, the sector lost more than $7.2 billion last year. So far, around 9 million Moroccans, or over 23% of the population, have been fully vaccinated. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Are you looking for some company while enjoying a cup of tea or coffee? Inside one special cafe in Brazil, cats will do the trick. The feline haven has been called a paradise for cat lovers. Let's take a look.
Here, cappuccinos and pastries are served with whiskers and purrs. This is Gato Cafe, a cat cafe in downtown Rio, the second most populous city in Brazil. Stroking a tabby with white patches, a customer says she's having the time of her life.
When I got here and looked at this place, I couldn't even believe it existed. I'm in paradise with all of these cats. I'm in love with them. It feels like I'm living in a dream full of kittens.
Paw-shaped biscuits and lattes dusted with cat silhouettes are also on the menu. Cat cafes originated in Taiwan in 1998 and were first popularized in Asia. Opened last July, Gato Cafe also functions as an adoption site for abandoned cats. They're rescued by a local organization known as Bunker Whiskers, or Bigajas do Bunker.
There are other cat cafes in the world, but here we are focused on the adoption and well-being of our cats. We work hard to have our own language, to have the Gato Cafe experience.
According to the Brazilian Pet Institute, the country was home to almost 80 million pet cats and dogs in 2019. Many animals were abandoned amid the pandemic as owners passed away and families were thrown into disarray.
Thanks for watching. My team and I are honored to be your source for the news. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.